Thank you, Selena, and to the panelists for your insight. Our next speaker is Maddy Dychtwald. She is co-founder of Age Wave, author and expert on demographic trends. Maddy.
Well, it's great to be here with all of you today. Oops, yeah, okay. I live in the Bay Area, so it's very convenient for one thing, and this is just such a great place to really, I raised my family here, I work here, I live here, and I've done so for more than 20 years, so it's just great to be here today. And again, congratulations. It's wonderful to have a new president, and I wish you a lot of good luck here. So, to put this into a little bit of a larger context, so that maybe some of Selena's remarks, and I'm sure what Myra will be saying also, can be understood a little better, I want to tell you a little bit about my background. For the last 25 years, I've been looking at demographic trends and what they mean for the workplace and for our lives. And for the last 5 or 6, I've been very focused on women's role in the economy and in our future, and how it's really transforming our world. And what I've really come to see is that we're part of a great human leap forward. We're all part of this demographic shift, women gaining power, that in fact may be the biggest change agent of the 21st century. And we're such a part of it that sometimes we don't even realize that it's taking place. Because after thousands of years of economic dependency, we're seeing a critical mass, not just 1 or 2, but a critical mass of women gain education, gain earning power, and in fact gain influence in our society, really transforming the way the world works. And again, we're so in it, we hardly even notice it. Keep in mind, in the past, women couldn't own property, they were actually considered property, couldn't open a bank account, let alone an investment account, and they couldn't vote to change any of these laws and policies, and that's pretty much the way the world worked. They were also not encouraged to gain the kind of education that you're gaining right now. In fact, most people assume that it was something for either the very wealthy or, just sort of a waste for women who would primarily go on to be wives and mothers. So why take the space away from a man? Well, that's changed pretty dramatically since that time, and each and every one of you are examples of how that's happened. One of the things when I think about the vote that I remember when Hillary Clinton was running for president. Now, whatever you think of her politics, it doesn't really matter, but she made a statement that really struck my heart and my mind when she was running. And she said this, she said, "My mother was born before a woman could vote. In 2008, my daughter got to vote for her mother for president." That's the kind of change we've seen in our lifetime. It's really rather amazing, and I don't think we should really, for 1 minute, take it for granted. And the world is changing, and I would say that education is a huge part of that change. In 2010, 73% of all high school valedictorians were women. And you already heard this fact, but women are actually graduating from college in higher numbers than men. By the way, see that young woman in the middle there? That's my daughter. And she graduated from USC about a year ago, and she actually got a job. We're all really happy about that. And as we heard from Lynn earlier, 59% of all grad students today are women, just like you. Many of you will go on to be that, gaining the kind of professional degrees that will give you real, as Selena pointed out, a real bargaining chip in the workforce. It's a fantastic thing because this education that you're all gaining right now is the underpinnings of the earning power that we're really beginning to see take hold for women. It's actually, this education has brought us to a kind of tipping point where, again, it's not just 1 or 2 women, but it's a critical mass of women who are gaining that education, transforming the workplace. For the first time, you already heard this fact, for the first time, we're seeing nearly half of the workforce is women. And as was beautifully pointed out, when you look at the professional workforce, It's 51.6% of all the workers that are in the professional workforce. They're women, women just like you. So it's a fantastic shift, and it's really creating another interesting trend that we never really saw happen before. Has to do with income growth. When we look at men's income growth since the 1970s, it's been pretty flat when you adjust for inflation. And that's not necessarily a good thing, by the way. But when we look at women's income growth, it has grown 92%. That's like an exponential growth. Now, before you roll your eyes and say, well, yeah, look where women started, that's where women started. We are making tremendous progress moving closer to gender equity. Now, we're not there yet, and we probably all have some horror stories about what we've heard along the way, but we are making huge progress, and you are the future of that progress. So, one of the changes we've seen as a result of this is that we're starting to see a new phenomenon, trophy husbands. Back in the 1970s, it was really rare to see a woman out-earn her husband. Today, 26% of women out-earn their husbands. Now, I'm not saying this is a good thing, bad thing, it doesn't matter. And women aren't necessarily trying to outdo men. Women want the opportunity to stand side by side with men as equals and to make choices that work for both of them. Because we all want relationships, right? What else are we seeing? We're seeing that suddenly when you're talking about wealth accumulation, it's women that are really positioned to see that growth over the next several years. It's women just like you. And there's a ripple effect of all this gaining education, gaining the opportunities in the workforce, and gaining that earning power. And I want to show you just a couple examples of what that looks like. For one thing, in the global economy, which is a very important thing, we're all tied to that global economy here in the US, and young women like yourselves realize that more than even old people like me. What we're seeing is that in third world countries, in the developing nations, when women earn income, they reinvest 90% of that in their family, in their community. So what does that look like? It looks like women in Uganda being able to afford school uniforms so they can send their kids to school. It's as simple as that. And then breaking the cycle of poverty that they've lived with. What else are we seeing? We're seeing in our country, and Selena sort of suggested this, is that women want to be entrepreneurs. Many of them are saying, I'm not really looking for a job, I want to create a job. And we're seeing women start businesses at twice the national average. Now, yes, some of them are kitchen table businesses, but many of them are not. And in fact, during the recession, we saw women-owned businesses hiring while large corporations were firing. We saw women help move the economy forward during the recession. What else are we seeing? We're seeing one of the most compelling shifts is that as women shift, we're seeing them change men pretty dramatically. And Myra will probably address this in much more depth than I am, but we're seeing that men really do want to get more involved in families. And in fact, what we're seeing is that men are 3 times more involved in taking on childcare responsibilities than they were back in the 1970s. Now, not necessarily taking care of the household responsibilities, but they like to get involved with their kids. What else are we seeing? We're seeing the research, and it tells us that when you give women positions of leadership, you actually begin to see dramatic transformation in a company, the kind of transformation that a company is really looking for, and that is bottom line profitability. Add women to leadership, become more profitable. And by the way, it's not one woman, because on a board of directors or a senior executive committee, one woman, it's kind of tokenism, right? You put on 2 women, for some reason it creates kind of conflict. I don't know about that one, but it does. And if you add 3 or more women, suddenly you begin to see mentorship and sponsorship within the board itself, and it begins to trickle down within the companies that women are on the boards and senior executive committees with. So we really begin to see change. And when business begins to understand that it's not just the right thing to do to give women jobs and senior executive committees and leadership opportunities, but that it's the right thing to do, then they're more likely to make those systemic workplace changes that are required. What else we're seeing in the global economy in developing nations, as many of these nations are beginning to see, when you give earning opportunities and educate your young women and girls, it actually increases GDP. So you see countries like Morocco, of all places, beginning to take very proactive steps to educate their young girls and women because they know it's going to help their country. What else? Well, The Economist told us that the increased employment of women added more to the global economy than the economy of China, India, or the growth of global technology. That is huge. That is opportunity in action in our lifetimes, something that will impact your life dramatically and directly. And finally, what we're seeing is, and we heard this statistic earlier also, that women have that consumer clout to really transform the way the marketplace responds to them. They make 80% of all household purchases, and they don't just buy food and clothing. They're responsible for 62% of all automobile purchases, 53% of all investment purchases. They're beginning to make choices and buy products that were considered the decision domain of men. So what I would like to leave you with is this idea that women's growing influence may be the most important, the most impactful, the most dynamic influence on the marketplace today. And I'd like to ask you all this question. How do you, and I'd like you to think about it not just during my presentation, but as Myra speaks and as we're all going through our Q&As, how do you plan on using your influence? Because each and every one of us will have that economic influence that we can change the world with in little incremental steps. So, keep in mind that the 21st century may be the absolute best opportunity for women, and on the other hand, women may be the biggest change agent of the 21st century, influencing our world at large, influencing our economy, influencing men, and influencing business. You are going to be the ones who make that happen. Thank you.